Well, here we are, back again, in a world full of beauty, horrors, and hands. Lots of hands. Grime 2 is an amazing sequel to an already amazing game. Combat is better than before, platforming is some of the best in the genre, areas are gorgeous, music is better than in the first game. Only downside to this game is some random frame drops and unfortunately, bugs. But today we're taking a look at how the game handled its boss roster, which contains over 20 unique bosses that you can fight. And I'm ranking all of them from worst to best, using the usual tiers of F, E, D, C, B, A, and S. Keep in mind, this will be based on my first playthrough, so if I get something wrong about the fight, let me know in the comments. So with that said, we start with unfortunately E tier with Melded Giant. Melded Giant sucks! It is essentially a slow big monster that just slams the ground, stomps the ground, and falls over. He also loves to delay his attacks and then instantly release them. Nothing really bad, just very boring and repetitive. His second phase though is an absolute mess when he starts spamming minions everywhere, which don't really complement the boss very well. You can get overwhelmed easily, projectiles can come off screen, sometimes projectiles are hard to see when there's so much shit happening on the screen, and it becomes an annoyance. And this is still early game we are talking about, where you only have one heal. My tactic was to get rid of the ads as soon as possible before the boss resummons them. It's just a boring fight that is made worse with the inclusion of ads. And speaking of boring fights, next we have Burden Smithed. Fitting name cause this fight was a complete burden to my enjoyment. As cool as the design is, I was again bored out of my mind for how boring this fight was. It's just bites, slams, more slams, and even more slams. This boss just loves to slam. Would have been fine with it if the boss didn't have such bloated HP pool. Also his hitboxes are just absurd. Like, come on, I wasn't even touching the boss. With that said, I think these are the only two bosses that I generally dislike, and we can move to a higher tier. Even if that tier contains nothing but mediocrity. Hand Beast. Well, it's a beast with a giant hand as a head. That's something. Yeah, you can see that I'm struggling to say something remotely positive or even negative when it comes to this boss. It's not bad, can be fun to play around with your toolkit, but I mean, come on, it's a fucking beast with a giant hand, what do you want me to say? At least the health isn't bloated, unlike with a previous entry, so you know, I gotta hand it to him that he doesn't drag on. But I'm not handing him any other rewards. At 22 is Face Blob. Honestly, the most memorable thing about this fight was just discovering it by accident. I went to this very obscure corner of the map, not expecting much, when all of a sudden, a unique boss hidden in this very corner. That was more memorable to me than the actual fight. Mostly it just wobbles around, back and forth. The face is funny and his charge is so goofy looking. Small thing I like are the occasional aerial denials that limit your movement. I like it, but after beating him, I just kinda forgot about its existence. Prime Pitcher is at first a unique mini-boss, but later appears as just a normal enemy with a more limited moveset. The music is surprisingly catchy for such a random encounter, but I like it. Mostly just pokes and swings, and that's basically it. I like how it can combo its melee swings with homing projectiles. That's neat, but yet again it's a very middling encounter. Overgrown Barrier is a first mini-boss you encounter, and it is fine. Before the fight you were facing with nothing but basic arm enemies, so this is a first proper fight you'll have. The structure is kind of like how Blasphemous games handle their tutorial bosses. It's basic, just slams, slaps, shockwaves, and that's it. It's fine, but really, this fight gets overshadowed by an actual major boss you fight soon after. At number 19 we have Great Blade Preacher. that dev was the only thing that was memorable about him. Don't get me wrong, his fight can be somewhat fun with slow, hefty swings which are very satisfying to fully parry. He also has ads, which I don't even understand their point in the battle. You can just only kill the right minion and ignore the left one. He won't aggro onto you if you stay as far away from him as possible. Which I think you should, as they really do not combo well with the boss. Also, I know I'm just zipping through these D tier fights really quickly. Sorry, but there really isn't much to talk about them. But worry not, as I believe that Bustling Barrier is the last mediocre boss on the list. This fight is very much similar to Overgrown Barrier, but with much quicker attack pattern, area-wide ground eruptions, and its most interesting attack is when the clones appear from left and right. There wasn't much going for the Overgrown Barrier, so I was pleasantly surprised with this tense and fun fight. Hell, I could even see this guy being in C tier in the future replays. You know what? I changed my mind. I'm moving it to the bottom of C tier. There you go, I'm handing it a C tier entry. But it's not going higher than number 17, Impaled Longblade, who has a pretty cool presentation, and the way he moves like a mindless corpse is pretty cool. He has mostly basic swings, some shockwaves, and from time to time he can send 4 daggers that combo well with his other attacks, or you can destroy the daggers so that they aren't a nuisance. There is one mechanic to this fight that I'm conflicted on, and that is the instantaneous spike explosion that happens when you get him below half HP. It's kind of a crappy inclusion since you're discouraged from parrying or attacking, as it will result in guaranteed damage. Using stuff like ranged modes or weapons helps, but still not a fan of this mechanic. At least it's not the worst use of it. That honor goes to the enemies in Palladium. Fuck these things! At number 16 we have 4 different fights with Lahav Knights. These are unique mini-bosses that can be found throughout the world who want nothing but a good duel. All of them are equipped with a different weapon and having a different fighting style. The third has a sword and is most likely the first one you'll discover. Fourth has a twin blade sights and he can heal constantly unless you keep attacking him. Strangely, he's the only one who doesn't have a boss health bar, but I'm still including him on the list. Second knight has a spear and a sword and can do some fun combos, and the first one has a great sword and a smaller sword that he can use as a throwing weapon while also doing some cool combos. These guys are just fun, nothing crazy, but for a mini boss they meet my expectations. And that's kinda the exact same sentiment I have for Mountainborn, who is also treated as a mini boss. And I think that's unfortunate since I can see a vision where if it had a phase 2, it could be turned into a pretty solid major boss. While all it does is jump around and slamming the ground, I really like this one attack where you have to bounce around the flying rocks so you can pull him down. I want to see more of those attacks and less of generic slams and such. At least the slams are comboed well with the falling rocks, so I will give him that. The design is cool, I just wish he was an actual major boss. Like what Tankard Warden is, who is at number 14 and is the first B tier entry. While he doesn't have a big health bar, he more than makes up for it by having a much more complex moveset and attack patterns. The way he attacks you and moves is unique. He's moving like a giant robot, and his animations have a lot of weight to them. And I love parrying his big deadly swings. He also has a good mix of red attacks, aerial denials, shockwaves, and throwing unparryable projectiles at you. Second phase amps up the difficulty by giving him more combo extensions and being overall more aggressive. The damage he can dish out is a bit of an overkill, but it did make him much more attention demanding than someone like Mountainborn. He is also preceded by an enemy gauntlet that you have to do only once and never again. Clearly the devs were not inspired by Silksong in that department, which I find pretty funny, but also good since I don't want to repeat it over and over again before fighting a boss. At number 13 is Twin Palm, who is presented in such a cool and unique way. At first it tricks you into thinking it's just an elite enemy, But surprise, he turns out to be a mini-boss. That was a bit of a surprise for me, but it doesn't have much going for it. It's just close swipes, some ground eruptions, some headbutts. Only positive I can give is how it can mix in red attacks that you have to dodge, but it is pretty damn basic, and its health is pretty damn low. But hey, it is just a mini-boss, what can you wait, what? Another health bar? That was my reaction when I realized it had yet another health bar. And now it has a much better moveset with reaction checks, position checks, longer combos, deadly explosions, and just being overall more aggressive. Honestly, what made the second health bar shocking is that no other boss, except for the last two, has multiple health bars. Unlike in the first game where it was just common to the point I was more surprised a boss had one health bar instead of two. So this reveal was executed well in my eyes. And number 12 is Anvil Head. Not the most intimidating name, I know, but he more than makes up for it by having some juicy overlaps. That's the entire gimmick to this fight. He can conjure different symbols that can do various sorts of things like aerial denials that have to be either dashed into or pulled to be removed, homing projectiles, laser that needs to be dodged at the last second, all the while the boss is doing its own things while also conjuring even more symbols. Those symbols work super well with Anvil Head's more simple melee strikes and shockwaves. And the overlaps are amplified more in phase 2 when they start to overlap with other symbols while the boss gains even more moves. I really like the big red wave that can combo with other symbols, making it a complete chaos at times, but I'm not complaining. His arena could have been better though, not gameplay wise but visually. It just looks very bland for my liking. It's not that big of a negative, but I wish he was better presented than a small room with nails everywhere. Thankfully a boss like Blade Mammoth is blessed with a much better presentation. The arena looks simply badass, and so does the boss. They really went all out with the monster designs in this game, and Blade Mammoth is one of the better ones. A giant mammoth with a big weapon that he can extend in phase 2 and start using it like a whip is so damn cool looking. And gameplay wise great, as it recontextualizes many attacks from the first phase. Like the simple jump he can do that sends spikes in both directions is made harder when he can just suddenly grapple and catch you off guard, along with many of his other attacks that caught me off guard with his insane reach. Also, while nothing crazy, I like that he has spikes growing from his belly, which makes sure that not only you're more careful about your dodge distance, it also makes sure that you're not constantly under the boss. The music is also great. They really improved the soundtrack in this game by a large margin. Last Sculptor is fittingly enough the last B tier fight, and is yet another boss that is all about overlapping mechanics. And he puts Anvil Head to shame cause holy hell, these overlaps can be insane. Not only you have to watch out for whatever the boss is doing, you need to also be mindful of your positioning, rocks falling from above, and sometimes being airborne when Sculptor decides to turn those aerial denials into shockwaves. But that's not where the overlapping madness ends. At certain HP thresholds that are highlighted on his health bar, he will introduce even more mechanics, like the 4 daggers you have to parry and a big sword that will come down from time to time. All the while you also have previously mentioned mechanics that you have to worry about. It is a lot to handle too, and sometimes can lead to some moments of unavoidable damage. But then again, it did make dodging some of its insane overlaps all the more satisfying. Not to mention that the daggers and the sword can be either used against the boss or neutralized for a brief time. The atmosphere and the music made it also a pretty unique encounter. And thank God he doesn't have the instantaneous explosions at those HP thresholds, unlike the enemies spawned in the same area. I refuse to believe that a fight this good is only labeled as a mini-boss, and not as a major boss. It just feels like an actual fight that is better than some major bosses. Which is the exact same feeling I have for Fleeting Karis, who is by far in a way the best mini-boss in the game. And I really wish she was a major boss, because they cooked something really special here. It's a good sign that the first thing that I am reminded of while fighting her is Surrogate Vulture from the first game, with her pretty arena and beautiful soundtrack. Even some of her attacks have some of the Vulture's DNA, such as this one where you have to stay airborne and then ending the attack with a big wave from both sides. That attack is awesome. Even the rest of her toolkit is fun to deal with. Her repeat stabs can be satisfying to fully parry or to dance left and right. The wing slaps that send a shockwave are also great. I like the stars that can be used as a surprise reaction check, and so on. She has a really good toolkit, and I was desperately hoping that she would have another health bar and go all out with her attacks. But it never did. Instead, I was left with the feeling of, oh, that's it? But it still says a lot that she reached A tier despite not having a proper phase 2. Number 8. Hand Visage. Gotta say, fighting this completely optional boss was such a memorable moment for me. The arena, atmosphere, the music was telling me that I discovered something that should have been hidden. Music especially is such a stark contrast to every other boss track in the game, giving more of a horror vibe than usual heavy rock guitar and epic choir you hear in most of the tracks. Mechanics of the fight are excellent, with her sending spike eruptions, bullet hell rock rains, some red attacks, rocks that burrow from the ground before launching at you, and my favorite is this one where you have to use your extended jump ability to get over the walls, so you can stun her for free damage. Only attack I'm not a fan of is this one. It's just not worth jumping over the spiked walls, so I just wait for a bit until she is done using it. Aside from that, it is a very clean fight that is very much fair and readable. Phase 2 is different. She ditches all of her moves in favor of a more erratic combos and attacks, making a lot of them hard to read or even figure out what the hell is going on, requiring some trial and error. But are those attacks at least fun and satisfying to master? Yeah, I would say so. They're really fun to fully avoid, especially this one where she comes out of the ground real fast and sending a shockwave, requiring both perfect dodging and staying airborne. So yeah, I would say I really like this boss. But it is glitchy. It is very glitchy. Sometimes she can send her spike eruptions in a complete opposite way even though she is pointing her finger in front of her. Sometimes there are no explosions. Sometimes her hand just attacks in a complete opposite direction, which may cause you to die. Which is just unacceptable. So please, Cloverbite, fix this boss. Hey, this is me while editing the video. In a recent patch, Hand Visage seems to have been fixed. Haven't refought her yet, but I hope many of the glitches have been patched, like it was told in the notes. Anyway, back to the video. Took us a bit, but we are finally here, the first major boss you fight, Bound Shell, who I think is far better than Amalgam from the first game. This is an excellently made first boss. Forget about the overgrown barrier, that was just one arm. This boss has 2 arms instead of 1, that's already better. On a serious note, the reason Bound Shell is this high is because her attack patterns, the animations, readability, it is excellent for a first major boss, and it does a great job at testing all of the basic mechanics you learned thus far. So you can play around with dodging and parrying. The attacks are simple, but still demand your attention. My favorite part in this fight is entirety of phase 2, where the shell goes in and out of its prison to do various different attacks, that are all so fun to deal with. So yeah, this is a great boss. Surely it won't come back again, like Amalgam did. At number 6 is Faceless Bishop Dorsh, who is a second major boss you'll most likely encounter, who is a step up both in quality and in difficulty, as this 3-mouth freak absolutely ravaged me. For an early game boss, it was a rough awakening, but I can't complain since I really like the brawl with this crazy lunatic. First base is mostly basic sword slashes and occasional red attacks he can use. Swings are slow and readable, but still fun to parry. In phase 2 he ditches the sword and decides to punch you to death, and then to stomp you to death. Why not? Why wouldn't he? As he said, Mara's greatest gift is the body. And he was right, he absolutely bodied me in this phase. While the punches and stomps are simple, I do appreciate the overall flow of the fight. He is constantly on the move, there is rarely any moment of downtime. There's always something happening, and it's a thrill. The music again, fantastic. Perfectly encapsulates the chaos that is unfolding before your eyes. But it is still nothing compared to possibly the best soundtrack in the entire game for our next boss. First met Merlissa and Malik, who serve as a climactic duel to what is possibly the best area in the game, Starmire. It is such an incredible area with some of the best platforming, some of the hardest enemy encounters and amazing visuals, and it being capped off by Merlissa and Malik was perfect. It's not a duo fight, but rather a back-to-back fight. First you duel with Malik, who is a pretty good mage boss. Cloverbite's previous attempt at a mage boss was Artisan, which was a total miss. But here, it's a hit. I like his spells and how he can close the gap with his fast charges and kicks. The homing spells might seem boring, but they're quite tricky to avoid as just dashing won't work. You can dodge the first one, only to be caught by the second, so you have to do some gymnastics with that attack. Another good thing about him is this one where you have to hop around before your partner Manzel comes in to help you. The part with Merlissa is even crazier as her spells are far more demanding than they were with Malik. Like her version of hopping around till Manzel comes in to help you is much more demanding. Her other spells are also great, specifically this one where they can create some crazy overlaps, and her most dangerous attack is her stepping on you. Not kidding, this attack killed me the most for some reason. This phase is perfect mechanically speaking. Visually it's great, and I love how Manzel and Malik are fighting in the background, making this fight much more grander and more epic. And to surprise me even more, they have a third health bar. When I saw this, my immediate reaction was, oh god, this is it, this will be epic. And then they die. What? I mean, I kind of understand, since individually Merlissa and Malik are pretty tough, but I would have loved to see them work together instead of just jumping on the platforms and then dying. I really hope if the devs add NG+, they give us Merlissa and Malik fully unleashed. They definitely would have secured their spot in the S tier. Instead, it is Mara's Shell who secured her spot in that tier. Can't say I was shocked that Bound Shell returned for a refight. What I was surprised by was the reveal of who Bound Shell was this whole time, that being Mara herself, with so many characters mentioning her and even having entire regions named after her. You get this picture that she is a respected and loved person. So I wasn't expecting that this whole time this was Mara, or I guess what is left of her, as her mind completely withered away. She's now just a shell of her former self. No pun intended. Even in her fight she seems more scared and afraid with the way she attacks you, and the music emphasizing the tragedy of her fall. It's very sad, but also bittersweet that we at least gave her a rest from this nightmare. Like Merlissa, Mara can conjure different spells that have very specific way of dealing with them, like staying airborne, dashing into green orbs, dealing with multiple falling rock heads, using the pull ability, and etc. Many of her spell combinations can be demanding, and some even can overlap. And the most interesting attack of them is this one, where the boss utilizes 3D space to send these rolling wheels? I don't know what they are. Either way, it's a cool ability and a nice use of 3D space. Something that even the next boss on the list utilizes even better. And much cooler if you ask me. Serpent. What a freaking fight. This is yet another boss that is reminding me of Surrogate Vulture. And you know what? I would go as far as to say that this boss is on par with Vulture itself. I love how at first the game tricks you into finding a new checkpoint, only to get teleported in this gorgeous looking arena, and Serpent coming in to greet you with ginormous arms about to squash you, with the rock guitar playing in the background. When I saw this for the first time, I immediately knew that this was going to be peak cinema. And man, it was. Some might even say it was absolute cinema. Every attack of the Serpent looks flashy and cool, and gameplay wise all of its attacks are great. Everything the Serpent dishes out can be used against it, and the devs did a great job with the variety of counters for each of the attacks. Some require you to parry, some to pull down, some to dash into, and so on. Even if the attack doesn't have a counter, it's still just so fun to avoid them while listening to the epic soundtrack. And to shock me even further, it has a desperation phase where it tricks you into thinking it will have yet another health bar. On one hand, I do wish it did have another health bar. But on the other hand, the desperation was great and far more dangerous as those pillars do a lot of damage. Only slight gripe I have with the fight is that I wish the pauses between the attacks weren't so long, as it can break the pace. It might not have crazy flow like the top two bosses, but the spectacle and coolness factor just makes me have to put it in number 3. Quad Blade is here to demolish me, more so than any other boss in the game, including the damn final boss. This is one of, if not the most aggressive bosses in the whole game, and will not give you any breathing room. First phase is already challenging on its own, with the boss constantly charging, sending spike eruptions, detonating the ground, extending its jaws, and more. While it is at first overwhelming with his insane speed and damage, it is some of the best back and forth in the game. The flow is just incredible. And thankfully the flow gets even better in phase 2 when Quad Blade pulls out its blade out of its space and starts attacking you with them, with even crazier combos, gap closers, and spinning around. Cause why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he spin all over my grave? Don't know for you, but this was the hardest phase for me to get good at, as his constant mix of parryable and non-parryable attacks and aerial denials threw me off the loop completely. But getting back into that loop was satisfying, and like in the first phase, the constant back and forth is still as good as ever. And finally beating him was one of the most satisfying moments in the whole game for me. He was for a while my favorite fight in the game. Well, until it finally came time to face off against Goel, the final boss of Grime 2. The whole game has been building up to this final encounter with a monster responsible for many wrongdoings in the world. Many characters in the game tell tales of his horrible doings, which paints the picture that when the time comes to face him, he will be the most dangerous monster to fight. And when you finally get to him, it turns out he is you, but not insane or monstrous like many characters were describing him as. Turns out he isolated himself so that he wouldn't hurt anyone, and in that process managed to become normal. So despite his awful crimes in the past, he managed to stop himself from destroying the world. But now he has to stop us, the player, from doing the same thing. This setup is genius. It completely subverts all of your expectations about Goel and what he actually did. But how is the actual fight? Man, it's so good. You know how much I love Dreamborn Terror, so seeing Goel being the same character model as the player, I knew already that this will be amazing. And to one-up Terror, instead of using only one weapon, he can use a wide variety of different weapons. Sword, daggers, scythes, great axe, spear, and a greatsword. All doing different things and all being engaging to deal with. He can also do an explosion as a reaction check if you're too close to him, and he can as well parry you if you're too aggressive. Second phase is mostly the same, but all of his moves are recontextualized with Manzel's attacks. Overlaps are happening everywhere, You have periodically moving laser, Manzel diving into the floor, creating more daggers, more shockwaves, and just creating a complete war zone on the battlefield. It is a thrill. The endless combinations and amazing flow makes this one of the fights that I never want to end. But sadly, it does. All of this makes Goel an amazing and perfect final boss. Still hard to say if I like Goel more than Terror. I would say that both of them are equally amazing, which just speaks volumes to Goel's quality when I say that he is on par with Terror. You may have not been acknowledged as a hero in your world, Goel, but I acknowledge you as the best boss in Grime 2. So my overall thoughts on the bosses are pretty positive. Only 2 bad fights, couple of mediocre ones, and most of them are good or even great. The game overall was an enjoyable experience, though again, it can be a buggy game at times. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching and see you soon with the next video. Goodbye.